Hey guys, it's Mr. Walker here. Welcome to another math lesson with Mr. Walker. I'm going to kind of just jump right into things today because we're kind of continuing what we've already been doing in our math lessons as far as working with decimals and how those decimals relate to fractions. And we've been kind of tying it all in using measurement, right? Using what we know about measurement, specifically meters, okay? So today we're going to just continue that and move on to the next place value with decimals, which is the hundredths place. Okay, so we're going to use meters today to kind of model how we can break apart numbers. We can break apart those decimals. First of all, represent decimals and fractions in the hundredths place, and how we can kind of like build numbers up or break numbers down using the hundredths place. Okay, so you don't really need much today, just something to write on, something to write with. Once you have those things and you're ready to go, click continue and we'll keep going. Alright guys, so I'm going to start here by bringing out my meter stick, okay? So we've seen a meter stick before, we're familiar with this. It's what I brought with me up in the clouds when we were fighting giants and stuff like that. But anyway, this is a meter stick, okay? And I'm going to base a lot of what we're doing today on the meter, first of all, and then breaking down that meter, okay? So I'm going to zoom out for a second here and see if I can get a picture with my whole meter stick in here, okay? Hang on one second. All right, awesome. And I'm going to use that picture to do a couple things and talk about this meter and how we can relate 1 meter to not only what we know about decimals and tenths, but also into the hundredths place and stuff like that. So let me get that picture set up in here so we can take a look at it. All right, awesome. That worked out pretty well. A picture of me inside a video of me. You can't get much better than that. I mean, what else could you ask for here? All right, so here I am holding a meter stick. And why am I having a picture of myself holding a meter stick, right? Well, the reason is I want us to think about a meter stick and what is a meter made up of, specifically when we're talking about centimeters, okay? So we know the length of this stick that I'm holding here from here to here is 1 meter, but how many centimeters are in that meter? Right, there's 100 centimeters in there, right? So this 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeters, right? Okay. So then what fraction of a meter would 1 centimeter be? So if I was marking like 1 centimeter on here, what fraction of a meter do you think that would be? Well, it would be 1 out of those 100 centimeters, right? So it would be 1/100th of a meter. So we could say that 1 centimeter is equal to 1/100th of a meter, okay? And as we've kind of learned from some previous lessons, even though we haven't addressed it like 100%, we can write 1/100th as 0.01 or 1/100th. Remember, we don't read it as point, we read it as 1/100th because this 1 would be in the hundredths place. While I'm over here, I just might want to draw like a cool hat on me or something like that because I can graffiti my own picture here, maybe an eye patch. I always thought I'd look cool with an eye patch. There we go. Alright, sorry, distracted. But anyway, we can represent 1/100th of a meter, or 1/100th of anything. We could represent that 1/100th right here. And that's because we know the decimal place value. Let me bring in that place value chart real quick. We know from our decimal place value here that these are the ones, these are our whole numbers. We have the decimal, we have the tenths, which is what we've been talking about a lot already, and then we have the hundredths. Well, I have 1/100th, but I have to put a 0 here in the tenths place because I don't have any tenths, and then I could put a 0 here in the ones place because I don't have any ones. I could also put a 0 here in the thousandths place because I don't have any thousandths either, but it's not really necessary because it doesn't kind of get in the way of what we need to show or what we're trying to get across here. So really, the important ones that I need here are the 1 in the hundredths place, and then I need 1 in the tenths place, and then my decimal as well, so I can show that it's to the right of there. Okay, so that's what we're talking about today is the hundredths place. So we represented it 1/100th as a fraction, 1 out of 100, and then we could represent it as a decimal there as well. Okay. All right. So let's say then for the next step here, let's say I wanted to zoom in on like this end of the meter stick over here, and if I were to zoom in on that, it would look kind of like this. Okay, so I'm kind of like zoomed in here. What if I wanted to represent 3 centimeters What if I wanted to represent 3 centimeters as like a fraction of a meter? What would that look like? Well, again, I would have 3 out of 100 centimeters, right? So that's how I could represent it as a fraction. If I wanted to represent it as a decimal, though, I would represent it as 3 hundredths, 0.03, 3 hundredths. Remember that 3 is going to be in the hundredths place. We have to put that 0 in the tenths place because I don't have any tenths. And then again, I could put a 0 in the ones place because then that would allow me to put my decimal in there. So 0.03, 3 hundredths. All right, let's take this kind of a step further here. If we look at this meter stick here, and I wanted to pay attention to, let's say, the tens. So I have 10 here, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and then this would be 100 here. So if I were to count up, I have 10 equal spaces among this meter stick, right? So like this guy right here would be 1/10 of that meter, right? 1/10 of that meter. How many centimeters would be in that 1/10 of a meter? Okay, I kind of said it when I was counting before, but in this 1/10 of a meter, how many centimeters would there be? Well, there would be 10 centimeters, right? 10 centimeters is the same as 1/10 of a meter, which if I wanted to kind of rewrite my 10 centimeters in terms of a meter, I could say that 10 centimeters is the same as 10 hundredths of a meter, which is the same as 1/10 of a meter. Okay? Why does this matter? Well, let's think of the decimal side of things now. If I write 10 hundredths or 1/10, they're the same thing, the same value, okay? Which is why when I said earlier we could keep adding zeros here and it doesn't change the value. This is because it doesn't. This is, we could read this as 10 hundredths, okay? 10 hundredths because it ends in the hundredths place, or I could read it as 1/10. It's the same value. Same thing if we were to keep going and say like if we had gone to 2. So if I went to the 2/10ths of a meter is equal to the same as 20 hundredths. Well, 2/10ths and 20 hundredths, they're the same value. Okay, it's not really going to change anything. It's the same spot that we're looking at. Okay, so hopefully that's starting to make a little bit of sense. But let's start to think about how we can break apart this meter, decompose it, and kind of put it back together again, thinking about those place values. Okay. Alright guys, so I have another example of a meter stick here, because me holding the meter stick was cool and all, but I figure one Mr. Walker head at a time is enough to cause a distraction. So let's just say that we have, this represents 1 meter, okay? And the point I was trying to get across earlier that we were looking at when I was holding up the meter stick and we had kind of broken it into its tenths is, here again I have this meter and it's broken into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's broken into tenths, okay? And when we're talking about kind of like the connection or the comparison between our tenths and our hundredths is kind of like the same as on the other side of the place value when we're talking about our tens and our hundreds, okay? And what I mean by that is if I have 1/10, that's going to be the same as 10 hundredths. Okay, so there would be 10 hundredths in that 1/10. So knowing that can help me write different values of decimals or express those different values of decimals in different ways, or at least be able to recognize them when I see them. So let's do this. If I gave you something like, if we said 2 tenths of a meter plus 5 1/100ths of a meter, would we be able to figure out what that value is by representing it first on our meter on our example here, and then like adding it? Do you think we could find out the value? Sure, right? Let's give this a try. First, I'm going to shade in 2/10 because I've already have this broken into tenths, so that's going to be pretty easy to do. So let me just grab myself a crayon here, and we're going to shade in 2/10. 1 and 2. So that's easy enough. So we can represent those 2/10 right away. Okay. So now let's take a look at this 5 1/100ths. I don't have hundredths on here yet, right? But I know that I could take that 1/10 and I could break it into hundredths, okay? So I'm going to come back over here now. I'm going to take this tenth right here and I'm going to break it into 10 pieces, right? And those would be my hundredths. So let's see. Alright, so I drew 9 lines in there, which means I broke it into 10 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I have that tenth. I've broken it into 10 pieces, so that means that each one of these pieces is a hundredth, right? So if I color in 5 of these pieces, grab a different color here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have colored in 5 hundredths, so I have my 2/10, which would basically be 20, and 5 hundredths. So my number would become 25 hundredths. Because if I wanted to really think about this, I have, if I took this tenth and split it into 10 pieces, those would be 10 hundredths, 10 hundredths, and 5 more hundredths would give me 25 hundredths. Okay? If it's easier, you can also think of 2/10 is the same as 20 hundredths plus 5 hundredths would equal 25 hundredths. You could think of it that way as well. Whatever's easier for you, whatever makes more sense. But this wouldn't be 7/10 or 7 hundredths because that's not what we're going for there. We do have to make those common denominators, but we can just kind of think of it as, okay, well, this 2/10 is really 20 hundredths plus 5 more hundredths. That's where I get my 25 hundredths. Okay, let's do one more of these because this could be kind of trickier to wrap our heads around, but I think most of you are probably getting this pretty quick. Let's say I had 41 hundredths. So there's 41 hundredths. Okay, I'm gonna write it here as a decimal. 41 hundredths, because my 1 is in the hundredths place, 41 hundredths. If I kind of broke this apart, I could have 4/10 and 1 hundredth, okay? 4/10, 1 hundredth. In fraction form, if you want to think of it as fraction form, 4/10, 1 hundredth, okay? And then, if I'm adding those together, I'd get 41 hundredths. Representing it up here visually, it would be 4/10, 1, 2, 3, 4, but I would have to take this 1/10 here and divide it into hundredths, right? And then shade in one of those hundredths to get 41 hundredths, okay? So hopefully this is starting to make sense, starting to come together. If you want some more help with this, please, as always, reach out and let me know. I can include after this video a link to other videos that'll kind of go over this concept a little more in depth, but I think most of you are kind of picking up on how this comes together and on what this is representing. So I appreciate you guys watching and hanging in there with me. Have fun with your tenths and your hundredths, and let me know if you need anything. Alright guys, I'll talk to you soon.